All right. Welcome to the Parsha class, Parsha Vayera 5786, with the commentary of the Taam Dagan, learning lessons in food, diet, health, and etiquette from the weekly Parsha. Hopefully, we'll find some things in the Parsha that have to do with food. In case you're suspicious, let me assure you, there's quite a bit in these coming Parshiot. So I think with no further ado, let's get right into it. Let's share the source sheet here. The Tom Dagan. There we are. Beautiful. What just happened? I don't know. But let's try it again. There we are. Okay. Okay, Parshat Vayera, in which the Torah teaches lessons about gratitude, the effects of plagues on the Egyptian food supply, and the Egyptians' attitude towards meat, and more. So, suffice it to say, a little introduction. We're now into the 10 plagues. The first seven of the 10 plagues are in this week's parsha. The last three are in next week's parsha. Bo. Everybody talks about how Bo is Bet and Aleph together. That's the gematria of three, and three is the is how many plagues there are in the parsha. Not too many people mention that the same can be said about the first two letters of the name of this week's parsha, Va'era. Vav and Aleph. Vav is six, Aleph is one. That's seven, and there are 7 plagues in this week's parsha. So also worth mentioning. And obviously, these plagues, as we'll see, have a lot to do with food, almost all of them. So we'll have what to say. So chapter 6, verse 12, we ended last week's parsha with a debate between Moshe and Hashem, and Moshe said even before he even got to Egypt at the burning bush, he said, "Don't send me. I'm not qualified for this. Send somebody better." And Hashem said, "There's nobody better than you. I'm sending you." And so he said, "Okay, fine, send me." And he's going, and he gets there, and he proposes to Paro that he free the Jews. And Paro, for some reason, says no. I will not let your people go. And then at that point, Moshe says, "Well, look," and then he makes work harder for the Jews, making them have a set amount of bricks that they always had, but now without providing them the material with which to make those bricks. So Moshe is super disappointed, and he says, "Well, I put all this work into getting here, and I told you I wasn't the right person. And why are you making me do this thing that's actually hurting the Jews?" And Hashem had enough. Hashem gets angry, and whatever that means, and it says, and then. Moshe continues his argument. V'daber Moshe lefnei Hashem lemor. He says before Hashem, saying, "Hein b'nei Yisrael shamu alai." The Jewish people don't listen to me. Yishma'eni Paro. Why would Paro listen to me? V'ani aral sfatayim. And I have blocked lips. And if the Jews aren't listening to me, why in the world would Paro listen to me? And I'm not a very good speaker anyway. That's basically how most people understand it. But what most people don't pay attention to, and what we need people like Rashi to notice for us, is that the word for blocked lips, the speech impediment that Moshe has, is aral safatayim. The word aral, ayin, reish, lamed, is the same root as the mitzvah that we have of orla. Orla is fruit that cannot be eaten or benefited from in the first 3 years of a tree's life. And so, what's the connection? So says Rashi, which Moshe describes his speech impediment as aral, blocked lips, right? Orla, food, is also called blocked because it's blocked from being eaten. It's not allowed to be eaten. It's there's a wall there that stops you from eating it, and that's the fact that it's 3 years old. It's blocked off. Interesting. I just because his 40th yard site's coming up. There's a famous story that they say about Rav Moshe Feinstein that he was saying the Shemona Esrei. It's not really connected to Orla in any way, but I just the image of like a wall occurred to me. And the story goes that Rav Moshe Feinstein was davening Shemona Esrei, and there was somebody who's standing very close behind him. Now, you're not supposed to walk your 3 steps back after Shemona Esrei if there's somebody very close behind you. And there was somebody behind him. Inconveniently, he came in late, whatever, and he decided he didn't know where he was supposed to stand. He's standing in the wrong place. He's davening in Shemona Esrei, and and just then, an emergency call comes in from Israel for Moshe Feinstein. It's a cloud urgency. There's a war going on, and there's some emergency. It's operation life or death. Something serious is going on, and Reb Moshe Feinstein had just finished his Shemona Esrei, but he can't back up because if he backs up, he's going to be in the way of this person who came in to daven behind him. So everybody's saying, Reb Moshe, this is an emergency. Maybe you just go back and finish your Shemona Esrei. So Reb Moshe said, "How can?" Afterwards, when he was able to speak, he said, "How could I go back?" By the way, everything was smoothed out. Nobody, Baruch Hashem, nobody died. But Reb Moshe said in the end when he was asked, he said, "How could I go back? There was a wall behind me." So people who take these mitzvot seriously, it's not like, oh, it's a nice thing to do, not to interrupt somebody's Shemona. No, it's a wall. There's a halacha. The orla is like that. It's a wall. It keeps you from eating that fruit. It's blocked. So if we imagine that when we think of the things we're not allowed to do, maybe things would be a little bit different. Next verse, we're going to skip to the next chapter 7, verse 18. And we are now talking about the plagues. We're finally getting into the plagues. The first plague is Dam. Dam is blood. The entire river in Egypt, the entire Nile River, turned to blood. And in part of the warning about it, it says, "V'hadaga asher be'or tamut." The fish that are in the river are going to die. Uvash hayor, and the river will become yivash, will become disgusting. V'nilu Mitzrayim, and the Egyptians will be disgusted. Lishtot mayim min hayor, will not want, will hate drinking that water. It's going to be pretty gross water. It's going to taste like blood. If you've ever had the unfortunate experience of having to swallow blood, it has that irony taste, right? Ironic, right? It has taste. There's a lot of iron in blood, and you can taste it. It's kind of disgusting and gross, and that's you don't want to be drinking that for a week. So the Taam Dagan says a large portion of the plagues in Egypt affect the food supply. So we've got food here, right? The first plague, the if you want to extend the amount of space that you can walk on Shabbat, you can make something called an eruv, and for an eruv you need to lay down food, and water doesn't count as the kind of food that you can use to do that. So it's not considered. So water wasn't considered very significant because people didn't drink it. There's even a suggestion in halacha that since water has no nutritional value, it is not forbidden to drink water on Yom Kippur in a case of need. So if you have to drink something, it's better that you drink water than something else because water is almost not considered food. That's one opinion. Others, of course, disagree. That's not most halakhic authorities would not support that. And based on the fact that medical professionals today have found water to be an important source of our nutrition, right? So nutritionists and doctors agree that water is very important. The quote from the Bill Bryson book, The Body, he writes, "We consume about 2.5 quarts of water a day, though we are not generally aware of it because about half is contained within our foods. The conviction that we should all drink 8 glasses of water a day is the most enduring of dietary misunderstandings. This idea has been traced to a 19 that the average person consumed in a day. What happened, Dr. Stanley Goldfarb of the University of Pennsylvania told the BBC radio program More or Less in 2017, was that people sort of confused the idea that this was the required intake. And the other confusion that occurred was then people said that it is not so much that you should take it in 8 ounces 8 times a day, but that you should consume that in addition to whatever fluid you consume in association with your diet and your meals. And there was never any evidence for that. One other enduring myth concerning water intake is the belief that caffeinated drinks are diuretics. They may not be the most wholesome of options for liquid refreshment, but they do not make a net contribution to your personal water balance. Thirst, curiously, is not a reliable indication of how much water you need. People allowed to drink all the water they want after getting thirsty usually report feeling slaked after drinking only 1/5 the amount that they have lost through perspiration. So there's a lot more about water that we can talk about in the drinking of water, but I thought it would be, under the circumstances, I thought it would be an interesting thing to see that water isn't I mean, there's a whole discussion in halacha how healthy water is to begin with and how important it is, but or if it's even considered a food, as we saw. But once we get past that, it's important to sort of know what people say about water nowadays, and what we know and what we don't know. Okay, so that's water, and of course, the water of the Nile River is cursed. There's a plague, and chapter 7, verse 19 says, "Vayomer Hashem el Moshe." Hashem speak to Moshe, and he says, "Emor el Aaron, tell Aaron, kach matcha te yadcha al mimei Mitzrayim." So take your staff and put it over the waters of Egypt, al naharotam, al yorehem, over the rivers, over the streams, al agmehem, al kol mikvah mimehem, on their pools and on their ponds of water, whatever, all sources of water. So you're supposed to like sort of wave your stick over all of that. But you dam, and then all of that's going to turn into dam. Vayat dam b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. And then there would all of the water in Egypt would turn to blood, including not just the stuff in the natural, in even artificially man-made waterways, but even in their water containers, in their wood and stone vessels. All of that turned to blood, and according to one opinion, I believe this is the Rabbeinu Bachya. Yeah, Rabbeinu Bachya. The plague, the water does not only look like blood, it tastes and smells like blood as well. So we always sort of like envision, blood, and it's red or whatever, right? So all the kids from preschool bring back, the cups that are half water, half white, half red, right? But they don't add the smell, right? It doesn't smell like iron. So that is ironic. I'm gonna keep using that joke. Moshe does not hit the Nile to bring about the first three plagues, or actually the first two. Stick that to number 3 there. All right. Rather, they are performed by Aaron because Moshe owes the Nile gratitude for protecting him when he was placed as a baby in a basket on the Nile to hide from Paro's attempts to kill all Jewish boys. There's a similar explanation for why Moshe himself does not hit the earth to bring about the plague of lice, which is the third plague, but relegates that duty to Aaron. Again, Moshe is grateful to the earth for having covered and concealed the body of the Egyptian taskmaster after Moshe killed him. That's Rashi. The obvious question, you can and should ask questions when you learn a Rashi like this. The obvious question is that the Nile and the earth are inanimate objects, and thus do not consciously give protection to Moshe, nor would they appreciate any show of gratitude from Moshe or anyone else. In fact, We do not show gratitude to inanimate objects for the benefit of the objects. By showing gratitude, the grateful person contributes one's own to one's own character development. So says Rav Eliyahu Dessler in Michtav Eliyahu. By recognizing all the good that one receives regardless of the source, one cultivates the character that leads a person to have gratitude for people in the future, and especially to Hashem for all the kindness that He has done for us. Being grateful is the essence of the concept of brachot, wherein we thank Hashem for the things He provides. We treat food with respect in order to demonstrate our appreciation for it, including picking food off of the ground and not throwing stones into a well from which we drink. Both of those are different Gemaras about different ways that we show gratitude to food, right? And Rabbi Yisrael Zev Gusman, Rosh Yeshiva of Netzach Yisrael, was observed watering various plants. When confronted, he explained that when he was fighting the Nazis with the Polish partisans in World War II, food was hard to find, and he survived on whatever edible plants he was able to collect. By the way, there's a little bit of a story there too. He was taught about edible plants by his Rebbe in yeshiva, and when he was being taught that by his Rebbe, he's like, "Why would I ever need to use this? Like, who needs to know what plants are edible?" And then, alas, he was in the situation where that was a necessary thing. Um, Maybe I should put that in there. Hold on, let me see if I find a way to fit that in. Yeah, we can do that. Parenthetically. This is why we do this class like this, so we can fix this work before it's published, if it ever gets published. Parenthetically, um, when his Rebbe taught him about edible plants when he was a youngster, stir. He wondered why he needed to learn such useless information. Many years later, he watered the plants and grasses in gratitude for helping him survive the war. But how much gratitude does the earth actually deserve from Moshe? The water actually saved Moshe by not drowning him, but the earth was not successful in hiding Moshe's crime, and he was compelled to run away to Midian. So some explain, I think this is Rabbi Matisyahu Solomon, no, this is Rav Shach, who says this. Pshat, yeah, Rav Shach says this Pshat, that the earth did succeed in providing Moshe with temporary calm because he was not immediately chased by the Egyptian. And for that momentary calm, Moshe showed the earth gratitude. That's also something. Even not always being stressed out is also good. Furthermore, even if the earth was totally unsuccessful in helping Moshe, he still needs to show gratitude for the earth's willingness to help and effort expended to cover up the dead Egyptian. And these are all lessons in Hakarat Hatov, in giving gratitude. And here we have, and that is like I said earlier, that is the very basis of the brachot that we say over food. What are we saying in Birkat Hamazon? We're saying, thank you, Hashem, Mefarnes lakol, that you give parnasa to everybody, that you sustain everybody, that you gave me food, you gave me meat, you gave me whatever, all the foods, all the nutrition that I need, I received from this world. I'm alive today because of the food that I've eaten that you've provided. So that's me being grateful. And yes, it's true. You have to work to earn the money to buy the food, etc. But all of that is just a way to hide Hashem's hidden hand of miracle. Hashem is constantly giving miracles, but He wants those to be hidden by our hishtadlut, by our efforts. The money we made was not from our efforts. The money we made was from the effort in covering up Hashem's miracle of providing us the food one way or the other. Okay, let's keep going. The very next verse, I think, was it two verses later, chapter 7, verse 21. So indeed, just as promised, the fish in the river did indeed die. V'yivash hayor, and the river became disgusting. V'lo yachlu mitzrim lishtot mayim min hayor, and the Egyptians weren't able to drink water from the river. Vehi hadam, it was blood. B'chol eretz Mitzrayim, and all of the land of Egypt. It wasn't just the river Nile. Of course, the river Nile provides the water for all of Egypt. They have very little rainfall, and they depend on the river Nile to overflow its banks, and that's what waters all of Egypt. The Egyptians could not drink the water of the Nile. To drink water, what do they have to do? The Egyptians had to buy it from the Jews. There's a midrash that says that they would buy, they would bring some blood to a Jew, or I guess the Jew would brand water, Arrowhead, or Polish Springs, or whatever. Oh, Poland Springs. All right, chapter 7, verse 24. The Egyptians weren't done. They weren't going to be, caught buying blood from Jews all day long. So they try to find another solution to this problem. V'yachperu kol mitzrim sevivot hayor. The Egyptians dug around the river, mayim lishtot, to get water to drink. Kilo yachlu lishtot mimei hayor. They weren't able to drink the water as it was. The Egyptians could not survive without drinking water for 7 days. That's how long each plague was, 7 days of active plague. So they desperately dug around the Nile to find potable water. Not finding any, they subsisted on drinking bitter, blood-like water that they found from around the Nile. That's what they were forced to drink, unless they were going to buy water from Jews. Okay, next plague is frogs, also related to food in some ways. Yeah. Chapter 8, verse 9 tells us, V'yas Hashem kidvar Moshe. This is already when the plague of frogs was being removed. Moshe asked Paro when he wanted it removed. Paro picked a day and a time, and that's what Moshe did. More or less at that time, he said, Hashem, please remove that plague. And here we have the first time where it says that Hashem did what Moshe said, not the other way around, right? Because Moshe does what Hashem says, so therefore Hashem does what Moshe says. And the same is true for all of us. Hashem, tzaddik gazar, Hashem asa, right? So when a righteous person makes a decree, Hashem fulfills it. That's because when Hashem makes a decree, the tzaddik fulfills it. So that could be us, right? We could have Hashem doing what we want, right, quote unquote, if we do what He wants. And so, did we read the pasuk yet? No. V'yas Hashem kidvar Moshe, and Hashem did as Moshe said. V'yametu hatzfardiim. The frogs died. By the way, as you probably know, there's a whole big to do in the commentaries about whether these are frogs or not. We've spoken about this in previous years. There is in Ibn Ezra and others who say that these were crocodiles, and it makes more sense in some ways. Hamek Davar explains, and it makes less sense in other ways. In other words, it talks about these things going into the Egyptians themselves, like into their throats. A crocodile in your throat, you're dead, right? But on the other hand, It was supposed to be a deadly plague. All the plagues were deadly. They weren't just annoying like we teach our kids. Each of the plagues was actually deadly. Dam, Svadea, and Kinim, all of them, and all the other seven plagues. All of them had a deadly element to them. Otherwise, if Paro were says Hamek Davar, the Netziv writes that if Paro was just annoyed, he wouldn't let the Jews go. He would have just killed them. He would punish them. Right? You annoy me enough, mess around and find out. You'll get hit. So, but that's not what happened. They were more than annoyed. They were literally there were fatalities for each of these plagues. But it says that the frogs were gathered in piles and they stink up the country. Why? Because Hashem did not want the Egyptians to benefit from the frogs, including by eating them. Right? If they weren't in these gross, smelly piles, the Egyptians might want to try to eat them, but they smelled up the place, and they were basically inedible and unusable. Let's keep going. Chapter 8, verse 17. Okay. Um, by the plague of Arov. Right? Arov is the plague of masses of wild beasts, swarms or whatever. Ki'im, so it says chapter 8, verse 17. It says, if you don't let my people go, Ki'im eincha, if you don't, Mishalech et ami, send out my people, Hinini mashliach b'cha, I will send on you, Uba avadecha, and on your servants, on your nation and on their houses, et arov, the arov. And there's a big argument about what arov literally means. We'll use Rashi's explanation that it's different animals. Umalu batei mitzrim, and they will go up, right? They'll go into your houses, into the Egyptians' houses, et ha'arov, v'gam ha'adama, asher heim aleha, and also the ground on which they are. So the plague of wild beasts included creatures coming with their familiar environments and their diets included. That's what it says. That's the way Rav Yoshua Leib Diskin understands the phrase that they came with are on the ground. They came with their ground because, like, imagine a polar bear. It gets transported to Egypt. They need to be in their environment to feel normal, to eat a normal diet, and to be scary even. Otherwise, they're just gonna be scared and not know what to do. By the way, is in the Gemara in Bava Kama, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, 19b, where it says when an animal eats something outside of its diet because it is desperate, this is still considered eating. In other words, an animal, yeah, even if it's outside of its environment, it gets nervous, it gets scared, it doesn't act normal, but it's still considered eating. If even if it's desperate, right? If it has nothing else of its own to eat, it will eat, something else. The lion in the Simba, right? In the Lion King, what is it? He eats the bugs or whatever, because that's what he thinks he's supposed to eat at that point. That's the only diet he has left for a while. Don't know if that continues after the ending, but maybe that's why they make sequels. All right. So, all right, chapter 8, verse 22. Vayomer Moshe. Uh, this is when in the debate with Paro about letting the Jews go, he tells Paro that the Jews want to go into the wilderness, into the Midbar, to make sacrifices for Hashem for 3 days. And Paro says, no, make the sacrifices here in Mitzrayim. And so Moshe says, Moshe, lo nachon la'asod ken. It's not correct to do this. Ki toavat Mitzrayim. That's a disgusting thing for the Egyptians, killing killing these lambs that were going to be sacrificing. Nizbach la Hashem Elokeinu, to make a sacrifice for Hashem our God. What happened? Um, one second. Let's see if I can do that. Uh, okay, sorry. I had to make a sacrifice for our God. Hey nizbach et toavat Mitzrayim. After all, it would be a something disgusting for the Egyptian in to see. V'lo yiskalunu, and they might even they might punish us. They might kill us. They'll stone us to death. So what's going on here? So it says the Tam Dagan that Moshe says the Jews need to leave Egypt to make sacrifices to Hashem because it would be offensive to sacrifice animals in full view of the Egyptians. Egyptians worship the lamb because they believe the lamb-shaped constellation, which is Aries, protects them, and they therefore do not eat lamb. Therefore, they would not eat the meat of any animal because they may share the beliefs of the descendants of Ham in India in restricting themselves to a vegan diet. I believe that's the Ibn Ezra, but it's also in Rambam and more in Nevuchim. Where exactly I can't tell you, but you find it later. All right. Either way, archaeological evidence of cheese manufacture on an Egyptian tomb indicates that the Egyptians then do consume meat byproducts. At least some of them did, at least at that point. Um, okay. Uh, last last piece for tonight is the very, very end of the chapter where we talk about the biggest plague of all up to this point, anyway. The plague, the mother of all plagues, right? Where everybody admits this has got to be the hand of Hashem, and that's the hail. Now, you'd think hail, by the way, isn't so miraculous. We have hail here in San Diego, even. And so the Chazal, the Midrashim, have to explain that this hail was somehow unique. There was fire inside of ice, and the fire and ice made peace for this purpose. Anyway, and so the hail comes down onto Egypt, and of course affects the food. Sorry, this is kind of covered up. Vapishta give all, because the barley was in the ear was already was already uh, ready ready to be picked, ready to be harvested, and the flax was in bloom, so it was already grown up. So that's why those particular plants, the flax and the barley, were hit. And the next pasuk tells us, "V'achita v'has kusemet wheat and the spelt lo naku." They were not hit. Ki afilod hena. They were not ripe yet. That wasn't the season for the wheat, for the spelt, and so they weren't hurt. They weren't hit. So what we learn here is that different things grow in different times. There's a season for things. The non-essential food crops like flax and barley are stricken by the plague of hail, but the essential crops like wheat and spelt are spared. We don't want to starve them to death, right? We want the Egyptians to survive until the next three plagues. So you can't kill them all. If they have nothing to eat, then they'll die. The hail likewise hurts only the branches of the trees, but does not damage the fruit. So says the Ramban. All right, so Paro sins while Hashem is sustaining his people, says the Sforno. And that's an important theme, by the way, used very often amongst the Nevi'im of the Jewish people. One of the big critiques that the Nevi'im say, and one of the things we actually daven about Erev Yom Kippur, when we say Tefillah Zaka, is that while simultaneous to us being sustained by Hashem, that's when we sin. We sin with the stuff that Hashem gives us. Right? Hashem gives us hands, and we misuse them. He gives us legs, and we misuse them. A very powerful idea, especially now for the weeks of Shovavim, to think about that all of the things Hashem gives us, that's what we use to do the bad things that we do. So it's a powerful idea, and definitely worthy of reflection, especially when it comes to all these other things that we discussed tonight with regard to food and appreciation and gratitude and that sort of thing. Where here you have all of the things we have, all of the things we're given, and we misuse them and we do the wrong things with them. That that would upset anybody, right? If I give you, I remember, I was uh, maybe not the best example, but I remember when I was a little kid, right? Came here from another country, came here from Russia, and of course, to be popular, uh, kids would ask me all kinds of words, not always appropriate words, right? How do you say this in Russian? How do you say this in Russian? And of course, like a fool, I would tell them. And then they would turn around, and who would they call these bad words? Me. Who else are they going to say them to? They're going to say them to the only person who speaks Russian. So, right? Otherwise, it has very little effect. You go around and call somebody else, sabaka or whatever, dog, right? So then nobody else is going to care. You call a Russian that would be insulting. So so like you misuse the things I gave you against me. So Hashem says the same thing very often through the Navi, that the things I gave you, you misuse. It's especially painful. As you can imagine, a parent, buys a car for their beloved child, and then the child, I don't know, runs over the parents with the car or something. That's especially painful. Besides everything else, it's the irony of using the gift that I gave you against me. That's especially painful, and certainly something we should be looking into in our own behavior to improve, as we all can and as we all should, especially in these weeks of Shovavim. And God willing, we'll all improve and be the best servants we can be for Hashem. And hope you enjoyed this class, and hope to see you again next week for Parshat Bo. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you for a good class, Rabbi Eddie. Good night.
Thank you. Thanks for joining.